Welcome back to Learn Your Stripes. I'm Ryan Guillory.
And I'm Michael Moran. And before we get started, we should probably tell the folks where we've been for the last several months. Quite frankly, we've been sick. And, not totally sick, Ryan, but I know we both had our bouts with just different ailments and illnesses. And
Yeah, it seems like when you were healthy, I wasn't. When I was healthy, you weren't. And so now, fortunately, as the season's nearing again, we're both healthy and beyond the CFO rules test and all those fun things. So we're in a good
Right.
spot again to get back to recording.
And I don't want to give everybody the wrong impressions. It was, just minor colds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we got into our spring season. We had clinics and things to get to, and that's not to disappoint the fans. We appreciate everybody listening. So, but we didn't prioritize it like we should have, or our bodies wouldn't let us, or our schedules wouldn't let us. But we're back, and we're glad to be here. So we'll get started. Our last play that we had from a while back. It was 4th and goal from the B3, and A21 receives a handoff and runs to the B2, where he fumbles. The ball rolls in Team B's end zone, and several players pile on the ball. After the players are unpiled, no one is in possession of the ball, and we ask what was the result of this play. Now, in college, it'll be B's ball, 1st and 10 from the B2. And the reason that is because of our 4th down fumble rule, and recently added, I believe, in last year's rule book, if we have a fumble from the field of play going into the end zone with no one in possession, we bring it back to the spot of the fumble. So since it was 4th down, A can't achieve a 1st down. They're not getting a touchdown. We'll bring it right back to where they fumbled. B will be in possession, 1st and 10 from their own 2. In high school, not quite as simple, maybe simpler. Since A is not in possession of the ball in their own end zone, and neither is B, A's fumble is what put the ball in the end zone. It's declared dead. It's now a touchback for B. So in this case, for high school, B will get the ball at their own 20 with a 1st and 10. So a little nuance there.
Yeah, I agree on both of those. It's a little bit different, obviously, if you're working both Fridays and Saturdays. But college just has those specific rules, both of which you touched upon, that we'll have to be mindful of, that puts it at the 2 as opposed to the 20. But a useful play, especially whether you're working just one level or both. On this episode, we're going to continue our series looking at all aspects of the game related to the goal line. This week, we're going to discuss play scenarios and mechanics related to the goal line.
Before we get talking about any specific plays and scoring plays around the goal line, let's just first discuss where we should be on these plays and talk about some of our mechanics. So, as we usually do in the order of things, we're going to go through our high school mechanics first, and then we'll jump over to the college side. So, if you were with Ryan and I when we first got this show going, we covered the Indiana High School Football Mechanics Manual. And briefly, under the Federation rules, 5-man mechanics going into the end zone, so from the field of play going in, the 5-yard line is kind of the division for goal line responsibilities concerning the wings and the back judge. So if the ball was snapped outside the 5, the back judge has the goal line and end line responsibility. And if we're snapped inside the 5, the wings take over from there, and the back judge will have the end line. Now, that's the broad Federation rules. So specific to where we are in Indiana, we have it a little differently. Instead of the 5, it's the 15. So for any ball snapped outside the 15-yard line, the back judge will line up on the goal line, and in addition to that, cover the end line as well. If we're snapped inside the 15, this is where things get a little different for the wings. We have the goal line responsibility the whole way. And Ryan, you and I, that was was last year the first year that we did this? Gosh. No, it's been 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has been 2 years. Golly, yeah.
It's
but
been a couple of years now.
We're still trying to get it right. I know there's been times I've been on the 14 and I've been caught napping, and Ryan has to get on the radio and remind me to move. So it's a little different in Indiana, but I think we're working our way into it, and it's working out well. So now when we talk about, go ahead, Ryan.
No, I mean, it's both of us can occasionally forget this, so it's good to have both of us reminding each other, because I'm as guilty as anyone of falling asleep sometimes on this.
That's why there's 2 wings, right?
Yeah.
Now we're talking about goal line responsibility. So if you're new to the show, what does that mean? It means that to rule on a play, you've got to be on the goal line. So if the back judge has goal line responsibility, he or she needs to start on that goal line. We've talked about, the running joke is what's the most important line on the field. And the joke is there's 2 lines, right? The goal line on either side. So, and I can hear everybody's eyes rolling. So, but when there's a play that's happening at that goal line, whether you're the back judge or a wing, you need to be there in a position to rule on that. So when the back judge has the line, they're starting there. And when the wings have the goal line, obviously they will never start on a goal line, but at the snap, depending upon where you are on the field, you need to be moving that way.
Right.
And so in our mechanics manual, if in Indiana, if we're at the 15, the ball's snapped and we kind of lead the play. I know in high school we're usually trailing the play, and even in college it's short wings, but we kind of lead the play. And then if we're at the 5, once the ball's snapped, we head straight to the goal line. So
Yeah, it's one of those things that despite having 100 yards on the field, as you get close to the goal line, everything changes for us, especially as wings, in terms of trailing a play versus leading a play, as Michael mentioned. So that's a discussion of what we're doing going into the end zone. Of course, everything changes for plays coming out of the end zone as well. Starting again with the high school level, under the NFHS mechanics, for plays where the snap occurs between the goal line and the 10, the referee is going to have inline responsibility there, and the wings have goal line responsibility. That requires the wings to move to the goal line at the snap. As Michael said, the only way to rule on a play at the goal line is to be there. Otherwise, you're guessing. That's the best you can do if you're not getting yourself to the goal line. Under our mechanics here in Indiana, for plays where the ball is snapped between the goal line and the 5, the referee starts on the inline, and the wings have goal line responsibility. If it's snapped on the 5 or anywhere between the 5 and the 10, the referee is technically responsible for both the inline and the goal line. Now, I know in our crew, Michael and I kind of help out with the goal line between the 5 and the 10. The closer we are to the 10, the more we're going to defer to our referee. But if it's at the 5.5-yard line, it's awfully hard for a referee to cover both the inline and the goal line by themselves on these plays. Regardless, though, all of these plays require any official with any goal line or inline responsibility to constantly be communicating with each other on every play. So this is exactly that scenario where you want to get on the radios before the play to say, so-and-so has responsibility for the inline, so-and-so has the goal line, so that we're not guessing or pointing fingers afterwards as to who we thought was supposed to be in a certain position on a specific play.
And find out, when you're with your crew, what's going to work best, as a group. Obviously, we have the mechanics here in Indiana and at the federation level for our guidance. When you're coming out from the end zone at that 5.5, 6, 7, somewhere in there, like Ryan talked about, maybe your referee doesn't have the angle they want by standing on the goal line.
Right.
They're just too tight to the play. They don't feel comfortable there. That's where the wings can help out, and maybe your referee starts a yard or two deep, but they need to be aware if they need to move up or move back. Obviously when you're inside the 5, that changes things. And likewise, going the other way, your back judge needs to be cognizant of positioning on the field, and where they need to start too, because that's just something that you're going to have to work through as a crew.
Right. And this is a really good topic to discuss both in the preseason and potentially work into your pregame discussions as well as to these specific mechanics. Maybe not necessarily every week for a pregame, but maybe every other week it's a good idea to bring up just so that come playoff time or late in the season, this is as fresh as it is on week 1 or week 2 of the year.
So now we'll switch over to college mechanics. And again, for the purposes of our discussions here, we're going to use 7-man mechanics. So once again, for plays going into the end zone, the side judge, field judge, and back judge will have the goal line for balls snapped outside of the 25-yard line, so much bigger area than compared to high school. And then once snapped at or inside the 25, so 22, 20, 18, somewhere in there, even all the way up to 10, obviously, the back judge has end-line responsibility. The side judge and field judge will still stay on that goal line. So this will mean that your side judge and your field judge are going to start at that pylons. Now, for you deep wings out there, and I guess we've had some brief updates here. I'm now a former deep wing in the Heartland. I got moved to line of scrimmages here, so I have to learn all kinds of new mechanics now. But I'm excited, looking forward to it. But as a deep wing, when you start on those pylons, there's good practice there. Just find that depth. 4, 5, 6 yards, whatever's comfortable. 6 might be pushing it, but find that good depth for you that's going to allow you to see those angles and open up. Moving on, once the ball is snapped at the 7 or inside, your line of scrimmage officials will then have the goal line responsibility from there, your H and your L. So this means that at the snap, both of those officials will have to get to the goal line because they have the responsibility, just like we talked about. They may need to even work backwards if the play ends up short. And that's something that can be kind of tricky. I know from a couple of games that I've worked, it's hard to start at the 6. You got to jump to the goal line, and the runner's tackled the 4, and now you're bouncing back to get the spot. And that just kind of takes practice and spotting and getting used to. So, but when the ball's snapped inside the 7, the referee also needs to know that they're responsible on forward or backwards because your line of scrimmage official's not really going to have an angle. And a quick note, a umpire has a responsibility too on whether or not the passer was beyond line of scrimmage at the time of the pass, or if the pass even crossed line of scrimmage. Again, because your line officials have bailed. So the umpire's going to have to get involved there too, just to see where, if you have something like an OPI or a touching or anything, the umpire might have to have a ruling on that. So be prepared.
Yeah, as Michael mentioned, one thing that we forgot to cover coming in here in terms of our updates. So Michael and I work on Friday nights together. And as he mentioned, he's moved to the line of scrimmage in college this year.
I buried the lead on this, didn't I?
No, we actually got moved to the same crews. So we're going to have an interesting, although in college, the positionings don't really matter quite as much. But on Friday nights, I'll be L, Michael will be H. And on Saturdays, we'll be on the same crew with me being H and Michael being L. So we're both pretty excited to have that development happen this year and looking forward to the season.
Yep.
So Michael talked there about mechanics again going into the end zone. Both in high school and in college, everything changes for plays coming out of the end zone. When the snap occurs between the goal line and the 3-yard line in college, the referee has inline responsibility, and the short wings here, have goal line responsibility. That requires H and L to immediately move to the goal line at the snap. If the ball is snapped between the 3 and the 10, L holds the line of scrimmage, and the headline judge reacts to the goal line if necessary. Again, any official who has any goal line or inline responsibility should be communicating with each other on every play.
Yeah, that's absolutely important because, again, we talked about the goal lines, the end lines. It's a very heart-sinking feeling to watch film and think, oh, if I would have just said something, the leagues we have, the schools we see, nobody's too lightning fast, and you generally have at least 10 to 12 seconds to talk. Use that time. We talked many episodes ago about pre-snap routines, and part of your pre-snap should be communication with your fellow officials. If you're doing high school, make sure you're communicating with your crossfield wing, or your umpire or referee. I know our counting offense or something like that, or Ryan and I working on Fridays, we have to look and see who's on and who's off. I mean, that's communication. That's part of our pre-snap. And likewise in the college level, communicate with your deep wing. When you get inside the 25, know who's got the goal line, because the last thing you want is 2 referees signaling touchdown. It just looks bad.
Right.
And going out, like we're talking about, when we say things like going out, that means we're coming out of A's end zone. You don't want to have to roll on a goal line. Your referee standing on the end line, and both H and L are on the 5. That's not going to look good.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, we've talked before about being a crew saver. In theory, everyone should know in every play exactly what they're doing. But it does help to discuss this pre-snap on every play, just in case something screwy just happened or somebody's just thinking of something else for a moment. Discussing this on each and every play just helps to make sure that everybody remembers exactly where they're supposed to be so that they get there. So, as Michael said, you don't end up in a situation where you're having to guess because nobody's on the goal line for a play that ends right there. And you sure hope you get it right, especially at our level where we don't have replay or anybody else to come in and bail us out.
Yeah, we don't. That'd be fun though. Someday, maybe someday we'll have replay. Maybe in the Heartland, that'd be something. That'd be a lot of fun. I guess now accepting applications for Heartland replay officials, right? We'll take a look at that. It's said 100 times. We talked about it at the top of the show, but these are the most important moments because it's going to be a tie ball game where the offense is down by 4, and you've got to be sharp. At high school, you're looking at 140-ish plays. College, you're looking at 160 to 170 plays, something like that. and it can be mentally exhausting.
Right.
And so when you get down here, you don't want to miss that step. And Ryan and I talked about it. We've forgotten to move before. It happens. Sometimes you're just lucky and the team's up 35-0, and he walks into the end zone and everything's fine.
Right.
But you don't want that to be the case all the time. So
Right. Right. You don't want to look at film and say, I should have been here, I should have been there, or I would have gotten this right had I done what I was supposed to do. You want to be there and be in the right position to make the ruling or make the call that you need to make.
yeah, and some of the I know a lot of our listeners too are working at similar levels that we have, and but even at the higher levels above us, more often than not, they're graded on mechanics.
Yeah.
If you're looking to move up, the grading is on mechanics. If you called a hold or didn't call a hold or called, that's fine. That's a judgment. But as long as you're in the right position, it looks better, it flows better, and it's easier to defend your position. So
Absolutely.
That's where these come into play. So.
Yep.
So we talked about touchdowns, touchbacks, and safeties in our previous episode, kind of episode 1 of our little mini series we're doing here. But it might be somewhat useful to kind of go back over those again. Today we're talking about the mechanics. And again, our third episode is going to get a bit of a surprise to it. We'll cover a little bit more with that too. But since it has been a while, we'll go back over it real quick. So a touchdown in high school. And again, the nice thing, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, high school and college scoring, all that is both in Rule 8. So they're side by side, which is really nice. So
right.
In high school, a touchdown is in Rule 8-2-1. And again, it's possession of a live ball in an opponent's end zone. It's always going to be a touchdown. So coming from the field of play, touchdown pass, caught in the end zone, or in the rare case, it's a touchdown when a backward pass or fumble is declared dead in the end zone of the opponent, of the player who threw the backward pass or fumbled, and nobody's in possession. So now the college rule, it's also 8-2-1, which is really nice. So if you have to flip back and forth like Ryan and I do on Fridays and Saturdays, it makes it really simple, but very similar. A ball carrier just advancing from the field of play that has possession, so just a runner going in the end zone. A forward pass that's caught in an end zone is a touchdown, or any sort of fumble that's recovered in the end zone is a touchdown as well. Pretty much straightforward from there.
Yeah, that touchdowns, I think, should be hopefully fairly obvious to anyone listening to this podcast or anyone who's officiated. And if not, just go look at Rule 8-2-1, whether at the high school level or college level. That'll get you in the right frame of mind for ruling on those. We talked about touchbacks as well, but I'd like to go over that as well, just because it's, again, as Michael said, it's been a little while, and that's our fault. We apologize for that, but we're back in now.
I guess if they're listening to these in order, it feels like 5 minutes to them. So I guess I shouldn't be too worried about it, right?
Yeah, not to boost our numbers or anything, but just go back and listen to episode 28, and we'll be right there. Yeah. But like Michael said, we're going to set this up because the next episode, we're going to look into some specific plays, and these will come into play there. But looking at touchbacks, we can look at high school rule 853, which tells us it's a touchback when a free kick or a scrimmage kick, which isn't a scoring attempt, or which is a ground to 3-point field goal attempt, breaks the plane of R's goal line unless R chooses a spot of first touching by K, or which is a field goal attempt, and in flight it touches a K player in R's end zone, or after breaking the plane of R's goal line is unsuccessful. It's also a touchback in high school when any scrimmage kick or free kick becomes dead on or behind K's goal line with the ball in possession of K, including when the ball is declared dead with no player in possession, and the new force is R's muff or bat of the kick after it has touched the ground. It can be a touchback as well when a fumble is the force, or a muff or bat of a backward pass or a fumble, after either has touched the ground, is the new force, which sends the ball to or across the opponent's goal line and provides such opponent is in team possession or the ball is out of bounds when it becomes dead on or behind its goal line. Finally, at the high school level, it's a touchback when a forward pass is intercepted in B's end zone and becomes dead there in B's possession. Now, for touchbacks in college, we would look at Rule 861. So again, as with touchdowns, all of this is in Rule 8, whether we're looking at high school or college. It's touchback at the college level when the ball becomes dead out of bounds behind a goal line, except from an incomplete forward pass or becomes dead in the possession of a player on, above, or behind their own goal line, and the attacking team is responsible for the ball being there. It's also a touchback at the college level when a kick becomes dead by rule behind the defending team's goal line, and the attacking team is responsible for the ball being there.
So we talked a little bit about responsibility of goal lines, and here we've talked responsibility of who put the ball behind the end zone, and we'll cover that some of our plays on our next episode. But we'll get into impetus a little bit and who put the ball where, either by kick or by pass. And one thing that stuck out to me, regarding touchback, an incomplete pass thrown into the end zone is not a touchback, right? The ball's just dead. But if they don't have that exception there, that could get kind of wonky. So little things like that are just kind of settled in nuance, which makes these rule books kind of fun in a nerdy way, I guess. But we'll talk a little bit about who put it where, whether it was kicked or batted or fumbled, and we'll get into that. So lastly, safety. One of my early mentors, he's been on the show, Joe Stafford, always said in high school, 3 things happen when the ball crosses the goal line: touchdown, touchback, safety. And if you're new getting into high school football, just live by that. Touchdown, touchback, safety. It's one of those 3, and that'll get you through a lot of hard times. So again, staying in Rule 8, it's a safety when a runner carries the ball from the field of play across his own goal line and it becomes dead there. The momentum exception is listed in this rule, and I'll just kind of highlight that briefly. That's basically to protect the defense or receiving team, I guess, if they were to intercept a pass inside their own 5 and their momentum carries them into the end zone. Now they have to stay there, obviously. If they come back out, the momentum's off, and we'll go into that a little more detail later on too. But just in summary, that interception pass between the 5 and the goal line, and the defender has momentum that carries them into the end zone. They can't go there on their own free will, but if they go in there with the momentum, they stay down. Then we bring it back to the spot of the interception. So it could be the 3, the 4, the 2. Another example of a safety in high school is a player who's either in the field of play or in his end zone, forces a loose ball from the field of play across his own goal line, whether it's by kick or bat or a muff or something along those lines. And then the ball goes either out of bounds or is declared dead. And again, this doesn't apply to any sort of forward pass because that would cause all sorts of chaos in the game. So lastly, the little one that gets a little interesting is if an offensive player commits a foul. So a good example, just classic, is holding, right? Offense on their own 2, and the left guard holds in the end zone. That's a penalty that we're going to enforce from that spot, and it results in a safety. So, and finally, to wrap up safeties on the college side, the ball becomes a safety is classified in college as a ball becoming dead out of bounds behind the goal line, except from an incomplete forward pass, or it becomes dead in the possession of a player beyond their own goal line. And again, in this rule, you'll find the momentum exception, very similar to high school. Again, intercepting that pass inside the 5 and up to the goal line. And again, the momentum has to carry them into their end zone. Now, the college momentum rule has a little twist in it with a forward fumble. So, yeah, let's get into that, Ryan. What do you say?
Sure.
Yeah, if a player were to intercept a pass, say at the 3, and the momentum carries them into the end zone and they fumble, and that ball goes then forward back into the field of play and out of bounds, the rules in college dictate that we would bring that ball back to the spot of the fumble, which would be the end zone. So it's then declared dead from there. So the momentum exception is still on. Right. That's very confusing.
It is.
And yeah. I've not seen it in the wild. I hope never to experience that. I don't know, Ryan, if you want to get into that at all. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, even watching games, it's very, very rare to see that. I want to say, and I know we discussed it because it's sort of the exception, I think, to everything else, but I think it was the Cincinnati, Georgia Sugar Bowl a couple years ago, where there was a play where Cincinnati, I want to say it was an interception in the end zone. They fumbled it forward, and then a Cincinnati player recovered it about the half-yard line, and his knee was down, but his momentum took him back into the end zone. And then the officiating crew, they got it right, but they had to huddle up just to make sure they had the spot right. And there it was down to the half-yard line. But the exception here in the momentum rule is that it's an opponent's fumble. So if the team that's recovering a turnover or a kickoff or what have you, if they fumble and it's recovered by their own teammate, then the momentum rule, you're not going to get that same protection. So
Mm,
that was kind of a screwy
great
play
point.
to watch, but it's the one example that I can think of either in games I've ever officiated, because I've never really had it come into play um, as such quite a nail biter type of play right at the goal line, quite like that. And it's the only one I can think of from watching a game where the momentum rule really came into play and really provided a discussion point for us afterwards to go over.
Yeah, and the point of this exception in both at the high school and collegiate level is to kind of protect that defensive player. Um,
Right.
I wish I could tell you why it was written the way it was. I mean, I'm glad it's the 5 yard line because it gives us big stripes to work off of, which is really nice. But if that player makes a great athletic play at the 2 or 3 and their momentum carries them into
Right.
the end zone, it's not really fair to be penalized with a safety for that athletic play. So that's why we bring the ball back out to where they, initially made that catch. But Ryan's right. It's all about protecting the defensive player, and you have to be aware of who put the ball in the end zone and who did what.
Yeah, I mean, for all of the plays near the goal line, and we'll talk about this with impetus and such next time as well. It's important to know how did the ball get into the end zone, who put it there, what was the force behind it, what was the last force that put it into the end zone, and we'll discuss those things. And those get quite technical, but they're important to know, and they really factor in here. But as a player, really athletic plays were never something I had to worry about personally. But now that I'm an official, it's something that I'll sometimes have to see on the field. But the idea here is you've got a long pass, you've got a player who intercepts it at the 3. Obviously, their momentum is going to be taking them backwards, and they may end up in the end zone. And it's unfair to that player if he just takes a knee or something in the end zone or gets tackled right there to have that be a safety. He made a great play. There shouldn't
Yeah.
be a penalty on his team for making a great play. Um, it's a very different story. Let's say he makes the interception, runs out to the 12 or so, suddenly reverses field to avoid a tackle, ends up in the end zone, and then gets tackled. That's a different scenario. Or,
Correct.
as Michael talked about with fumbles and whatnot. But anytime these plays happen, whether we're talking about an interception, a fumble, a kick return, it's important to have a beanbag down at the spot where that turnover, that change of possession, the end of the kick where it happens. So the kick is caught at the 3, the interception occurs at the 1. Have a beanbag there so that if the momentum exception applies, whether at the high school level or college, we know where to go back and put it, right?
Mm.
Because there's a lot going on here. Um, you could have the momentum, you could have the change of possession at, again, the 2, the 3, the 4, whatever. You could have a fumble in the end zone, so you probably need a beanbag there as well to know where the spot of the fumble is in case there's a foul in the end zone as well.
Yep.
These things start to compound, but it's hard to know, especially at the high school level, if you're a back judge or something, right? And you're the only person back there, you're not going to have help knowing where that momentum exception applies. You won't have help knowing necessarily where the foul occurred. You're going to have 500 things running through your head all at once. And the only way to know where that play ended, so you can know where to go back if the momentum exception is applicable, is wherever your beanbag is in the field of play. So you've got to have some marker down there so that we know where to set that ball when B takes possession.
And that's, ladies and gentlemen, that's why I work line of scrimmage.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. These are very easy for me to say, although they
Yep.
can apply to us as well. If we're near the goal line, if we're inside the
Don't.
7 and
No. No.
we've got that
Nope.
nose tackle who makes a
Nope.
brilliant athletic interception at the 1, that's going to be on us, Michael. Um, no, but I mean, seriously, these are important
Yeah.
things. It's also important to have good positioning, have that beanbag down, and know where things go, um, so that we know what to do here. This is in 5-man mechanics. that back judge is going to be on an absolute island. In 7-man mechanics, generally you're going to have some help. If it's a punt, you'll have 3 back on the goal line for this. You'll have other things going on. But you may be the only person ruling on this if it's in high school, and take all the little opportunities you have to give yourself some help with beanbags, with other things. And again, we've always heard the axiom as well. If this takes place, if that interception takes place on the 6-inch line, right, and the momentum carries them into the end zone, make it a touchback, right?
Yeah.
When it's super duper close, make it a touchback. If it's at the 4, you can't make it a touchback. Really, there's enough room there to get that beanbag down and know where we're going. But if that interception occurs with 1 foot in the field of play, 1 foot in the end zone, and the ball, in your estimation, is at the 1 foot line, make it a touchback. It's close enough that it's really not going to be legitimately questioned, or it's not something that replay could overturn if replay applies anyway. So when in doubt, when it's very close, make it a touchback. Otherwise, make sure to get a marker down so that we know where to put it if the momentum exception applies.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting episode. We should have a couple of guests on and talk about the equipment that's needed. I know we talked a little bit about, again, if you go back to our earlier episodes with, at least on the high school level, mechanics and beanbags and flags. If you're new to this, either our show or you're new to officiating, talk with other officials. I know I carry 2 flags. I usually carry 1 beanbag. Maybe I should start carrying 2. But just talk to different guys, see what they're carrying. Ryan and I on the line, we carry zip ties with the chains break. I've got tape to measure chains. I mean, just different things like that on high school.
Thinking through, well, in high school and college are pretty similar. I always have 2 whistles, 2 flags, 2 beanbags, zip ties, a pencil, my card, 2 down markers, 2 down indicators for my hands.
Yep.
Obviously, in addition to the uniform stuff, in
right?
college,
shirt, pants, shoes, hat.
Right. Yeah, so that goes without saying.
Snacks at halftime. Make sure if you're new, bring snacks for halftime or water. Just in case, or whatever.
But at the college level, I always bring the clips out. I know you always bring the clips out at high school, just because you're H in high school, I'm H in college. So those are things that we'll bring out and provide to the chain crews as well. But for the most part, anything that you could possibly lose during a game, which could be a beanbag, it could be a flag, it could be a whistle, I think it's a good idea to have 2 of those on you when you go out to the field. So, and I'm not chiding you there, Michael, for the 1 beanbag. I work.
Oh no, I actually should. I had somebody take my beanbag. Yeah, I was working a game. I bagged something, and official I was working with, he just picked it up, and about 4 plays later, I said, "Hey, so and so, you see my beanbag?" He goes, "Oh yeah, I picked it up." I was like, "I need that."
Yeah, I think I've told you the story before. When I worked back judge in a college game last year in the snow, on the first punt, I threw my beanbag and it just sunk down in the snow and I couldn't find it. So I was down to my backup beanbag. Yep. Next punt, I threw it, couldn't find it. So the first quarter of the game, I'm out of beanbags, and I wish I had 3 or 4 on me at that point in time. So again, it's always good to at least have some redundancy, and weather conditions, as I've learned, may force you to have some extra redundancy on certain items as well.
We tangented a little bit from the momentum rule there, but hopefully everybody got something out of that. But we left off with safeties for college, not the position, but scoring a safety. So we talked about basically bringing the ball back into your own end zone, with the exception of the momentum rule. The only other item to highlight for a safety in college is, again, similar to high school. If we have an accepted penalty that leaves the ball behind the goal line, a la, that holding on the offense in the end zone, something like that. I know folks have seen that before too, a couple of times. So,
the certain offensive penalties, you're most likely going to see it with holding or intentional grounding in the end zone. Yeah. I think those are your 2 most likely scenarios. I suppose there could always be, you could have an illegal forward pass, I suppose. Although to have an illegal forward pass, the line of scrimmage is going to be outside the end zone, so you can't really have an illegal forward pass inside of the end zone, just in terms of crossing the neutral zone for that release. But there are certainly other things that could happen penalties, but I think your most likely scenarios you're going to have would be that holding or that intentional grounding in the end zone for the safety there. Again, I know this was a little bit redundant from the last episode, although through our own fault, that last episode was a long time ago in a football galaxy far away. And so we appreciate your patience with us. We appreciate you coming back and listening. On the next episode, we're going to talk about some specific plays where these things apply. But we're going to start out by talking about impetus and force, because I think it sort of ties all this together. And then we'll get those plays to give some examples of all the things we've talked about on this episode, the previous episode, and what's coming in the next one. But we'd like to thank you for joining us once again for another episode of Learn Your Stripes. Again, on our next episode, we'll discuss some specifics and sometimes tricky plays involving the goal line. For now, though, as always, we'll leave you with a play to consider.
All right, so in the spirit of all we discussed tonight with the goal line, we'll have our question. A1 throws a forward pass from the B20 yard line. B1 intercepts on his own 2-yard line and circles back into his end zone. While B1 is in the end zone, the covering official inadvertently sounds their whistle. And the key thing we want to point out here is B1 circling back into the end zone. So we'll ask you at home, what's your ruling in both high school and college? So we'll leave it open-ended that way because there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot to think through here. So we'd be interested in your rulings. And as always, we're going to discuss that play at the start of our next episode. In the meantime, though, if you want to let us know what your ruling would be, or if you have any questions or feel we made a mistake, please email us at learnyourstripes@gmail.com. You can also contact us at learnyourstripes@gmail.com if you are interested in sponsoring an episode or advertising on the show. You can find us on your app of choice or obtain episodes at learnyourstripespodcast.com. Please also follow us on Facebook at Learn Your Stripes Podcast, on Instagram at the same name, and on Twitter at LYS_podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends and rate us 5 stars and leave a review on your app of choice. We'll see you back soon. In the meantime, keep learning your stripes.
Thank you, everyone.